On this super review, let's take a look at the Kinera Sif. I don't have a lisp. So I've reviewed quite a few different budget in-ear monitors on this channel from a lot of familiar brand names, right? You've probably heard of KZ, Tin Hi-Fi, TRN. I heard a lot of different budget in-ears from them. Well, here I've got a new one from a different company that I haven't heard before. This is the Kinera Sif, and I'm familiar with Kinera, but I haven't heard anything by them. Definitely haven't heard anything budget, but I'm pretty interested to check out this earphone. So worth knowing, this is around $37 and it is a single dynamic driver earphone. But the thing that's got me the most interested is that the general build or the design, the physical design of this earphone is one of my favorites. It's basically that Shure style, kind of looks like a bean that fits in the side of your ear. Those are my favorite. I'm not sure if I'm gonna love the Sif, but let's go ahead and open it up and find out. All right, so I've been listening to the Kinera Sif for a bit now, but I did have to wait a little bit to listen to them because Kinera recommends that you burn these headphones in for 30 hours before listening to them. Now, I'm not the biggest believer in burn-in, but they sent these headphones to me, so I might as well do them the courtesy of burning them in. So I did burn them in, and I've spent some time listening to them, and I think that in this price range, and again, these things are around $37, they're kind of in a unique position in the market. They do some things pretty unique, but I don't know that it's my favorite earphone in this price range. We can start by talking about the build like I usually do. And that's one of the things that I think sets this earphone apart from a lot of others in this price range is, like I talked about before, I really like this shape, this general shape. And I thought that I would like this shape when I saw pictures of it in practice living with this earphone. I do, I really like the shape. I think this is like the shape that I kind of want all in-ear monitors to be, frankly. It's just, I don't know, it plugs into my ears at least very, very well, gives me pretty good isolation, it's super comfortable. Maybe it's worth calling out that this is a little bit bulkier than some other earphones that are this shape that I really like. Like for me, I think my most comfortable earphone is the Shozy Cross Neo CP. Very similar shape, but these are a little bit bulkier, and because of that, they did cause a little bit of ear fatigue after a while, but for the most part, I'm really happy with the way that these things fit. And I'm also pretty happy with the way that these things look. We talked about, or I talked about how these things kind of have a unique position in this price range. And I think part of that unique position is that it's just a nice, mature looking earphone. There's nothing like goofy or shouty about it. It's just kind of classy looking. I like the white plastic. And it is an all plastic shell. It's very lightweight. It doesn't feel especially premium, but it also, I don't think, feels especially cheap or anything like that. The cable that it comes with is a pretty nice cable. I think, again, especially in this price range, this is actually a really nice cable. My only small quibble is that these ear hooks are a little bit aggressive, and it can make it a little bit tangly when you wind it up and then unwind it. But again, that's a pretty minor complaint. Overall, like the softness of the cable, the look of the cable, I'm pretty into it. So they've got a great shape. They've got a pretty mature look. I think they're doing better than their price range in that regard. I think though, when it comes to the sound signature and the execution of the sound, they're about average for the price range, in my opinion. The overall signature I would describe as a pretty warm, bassy sound, which, you know, if you really like a nice, relaxing, bassy listen, you might quite like this earphone. For me though, it's definitely too strong on the bass. I don't play with EQ a ton, but I usually do play with EQ to try and find out I'll think, I think that, you know, the upper mid range here could use a lift, or that there's a little bit too much bass, and I'll pull down the EQ, see if it's giving me the sound that I think I want. And that kind of gives me a good idea of where an earphone is lying on the frequency range. And for me, I had to drop the mid bass by about 8 to 10 decibels before this started sounding closer to what I like. And now, look, I like some bass. I don't need a ton of bass. And in my opinion, the mid bass here especially is just a little bit overwhelming. Again, I think a lot of people are gonna like that. And it's not especially well done, you know, it's a little bit boomy. I think the mid range generally in this earphone gets very overshadowed by that mid bass. So if you're into mid range, you're into vocals and instruments that land in that area, you're not gonna really be able to pull it out from around that mid bass hump. But if you just kind of want a big thumping earphone, it does that fairly well. The treble region is, I would say, a pretty relaxed for the most part. There's a little bit of harshness maybe in like the lower treble, and it's more in the upper treble region where it rolls off pretty steeply. So these don't sound especially airy. They don't sound especially detailed or anything like that. But they're not particularly harsh in the treble. I think there's just not a lot of earphones, frankly, under like $70 that do treble that well. And I don't think that the Kinera Sif is an exception. It does it fine, but it's just, I don't know, not particularly engaging in the treble region. And then Sibilance is a bit of an issue here. If you're listening to songs with Sibilance in them, again, my go-to track for testing that is Pictures of You by Cure. And it was not especially well handled here, but to be fair, it's not especially well handled on a lot of earphones. I think the biggest problem for me with a lot of earphones under $50 is the fact that the Tin Hi-Fi T2 still exists. Now, the Tin T2 was actually, I don't know if I talked about this when I reviewed it about a year ago, it was actually my first in-ear monitor, and I don't think I realized back then just how good it was, but I've gone back to it pretty recently, and that is still a really good in-ear monitor for around $30 to $50 depending on where you find it. Now this Kinera Sif is $37, so it's on the low end of that price range. The T2 might be, you might have to consider that a more expensive in-ear, but I think, at least for my taste, look, the Tin T2 is still gonna be my go-to reference. The Kinera Sif, I think it's a decent attempt, but versus the Tin T2, like the T2's just got a much stronger mid-range. It doesn't have nearly as much bass, so if you want more bass, well, you'll probably prefer the Kinera Sif. And then the treble on the Tin T2 is just, I think, a lot more better executed. So out of 5 stars, I'll give the Kinera Sif pretty solid 3 stars out of 5. I think that, again, like this look is really pretty handsome and pretty grown up, which you can't say for most sub $50 in-ear monitors. I think it's just a good looking earphone, and it fits really well too. I didn't mention this, I forgot to mention this, but this is actually also a really good earphone for sleeping in. If you're looking for something that you can sleep in and won't be uncomfortable, I think this style of earbud is really good for that. In fact, the Tin T2, I just got done talking about how much I like that earphone. I think for sleeping, there's no question that this is a better fit for that activity. But unfortunately for sound, look, it's just, for my personal tastes, it's just kind of a boomy, bassy sound, not a lot of detail, not a lot of mid-range. And for some people, that might be exactly what you're looking for. For me, it's not quite there, but I do appreciate what these guys, the Kinera folks, are going for. if you're interested in checking out the Kinera Sif, of course, as always, I've got links in the description down below. While you're down there, you can hit the like button for the video if you liked it. You can subscribe to the channel, and then I'll see you in the next super review.